I woke up this morning thinking about freedom, thinking about blackness, thinking about what does Juneteenth mean today with the murder of George Floyd, with the officers who killed Breonna Taylor still walking around free, and helping to contextualize Juneteenth as a whole as it all of a sudden rises to the top of our American consciousness at a time when Black people are feeling a strong sense of pride, a strong sense of resistance in this country, and we're looking for something to celebrate us the same way that many Americans celebrate July 4th. And we don't always feel that same sense of connection with that day because our experience in this country has been so different. But as I was thinking about it this morning, I had great pause because Juneteenth is rooted, as many things in our country are, in white power and this idea that a white man could grant freedom to people. And I believe that only individual people can grant themselves their freedom, their liberation. And I want us to understand the context of Juneteenth and understand Abraham Lincoln's decision to free enslaved Black people in this country, which was not, as many people think, and as we are often taught in elementary school, because it was the morally right thing to do. The United States has never done anything for Black people because it was a morally right decision. Abraham Lincoln, first of all, when he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation that freed enslaved Black people, it only freed enslaved Black people in southern states. Enslaved people in the border states were not freed. And it was an economic decision because he realized, and his cabinet realized, that the Southern economy is built and upheld by slave labor. And so in his civil war against the Southern states, as he was trying to break their backbone, he tried to take away their economic engine. So understand that the freedom of enslaved people was never about a moral decision that slavery was wrong. It was an economic decision, and it wasn't even for all enslaved people. So as we go out and celebrate it, Juneteenth today, understand that. And also, the Emancipation Proclamation happened, it went into effect on January 1st. But it took many months for the news to travel, and the final area that it got to was Texas on June 19th, when enslaved Black people there finally learned they were free. And so I have issue with this idea that we equate Juneteenth to Independence Day as if it were the equivalent of July 4th. And the other reason why it is not is because all it did was, as I said, it didn't even affect all enslaved Black people. So it was a very selfish move on the behalf of the president, and it was a very narrow move. And so sometimes it gets conflated that, wow, Abraham Lincoln is this hero, and he freed Black people. He merely lifted shackles off enslaved Black people in southern states for an economic reason. Again, the United States has never done anything for Black people because it was the morally right thing to do. And as we've seen afterwards, it wasn't like they were actually free, right? We had sharecropping. We had 100 years of terrorism through Jim Crow laws. So even today, there is a strong argument that Black people truly are not free in this country. So as we celebrate today, as we often do in the United States and turn everything into almost a Christmas holiday, understand the context of what happened on Juneteenth and the bigger picture of Black freedom and liberation. When we conflate Juneteenth to July 4th, July 4th celebrates the birth of a country, a country that white people fought against the British for. They did not ask the British, could you set us free? They fought for it and earned a nation state out of it. Black people did not get a nation state out of slavery. They didn't even earn, they were given their individual freedom, but only a crumb of it. That the institution of slavery was no longer in effect. But they did not gain a nation state. If you want to look at Black freedom as an Independence Day, you would have to turn to a country like Haiti, which was the first independent Black nation in the Western Hemisphere. In that country, Black people under the leadership of Toussaint Louverture burned the entire French colony to the ground and earned their freedom through armed resistance, at which point a nation state was birthed. And so I want us to understand, as we think about this, when we talk about independence, that usually comes with the birth of a country, a nation state, a piece of land, a territory that you earned, right? Assata Shakur said, and I'm giving a rough quote here, no people in the history of this earth have ever gained their independence by appealing to the moral consciousness of their oppressors. And that is the strategy that Blacks have had to use for over 200 years, is appealing to the moral consciousness of white people. Think about it. George Floyd, the officers who murdered George Floyd, are not in jail because the government of Minneapolis felt it was the right thing to do, that it was morally wrong for them to kill him. They put the officers in jail because a video existed of it, and there was public pressure to arrest those officers. The right thing to do, the moral thing to do with Breonna Taylor would be to arrest those officers. But as we see, that is not the case. In the civil rights movement, Black people and whites that supported them tried to appeal to the moral conscience of the white government to grant Black people voting rights, which again gets back to this point about freedom in this country. Even after Black people were freed from enslavement, they didn't have equal rights of white citizens. And when they were finally granted voting rights, it wasn't because it was the moral thing to do, because if that was the case, you would have done it in 1865, not in 1965, but it was because of the political pressure that was put on them by people in the civil rights movements, marching, being beaten, being hung. So as we celebrate Juneteenth today, understand the context of it. That it isn't true freedom. That it wasn't a moral decision, that we didn't win a nation state. That we still today are second-class citizens. And that I would use today as more of a reflection day rather than a celebration of freedom. It is not the same as July 4th. We have to think of, and the question I'll leave you with, is what does Black liberation truly look like for Black people living in this country? Reparations is a strong case. Can Black people truly be free in this country? I think those are questions that we have to grapple with. It is important to celebrate Juneteenth, to celebrate the freedom of Black people from bondage, but understand the context. Understand it has never been about the morally right thing to do, and understand that we still have a long way to go. Thank you for listening. Let's keep fighting. Appreciate your time.